Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alistair Menzies from the IEC Central Office, and I'm joined here by Sarah Song, who's Layout Coordinator here at the IEC Central Office. And welcome to this afternoon's session on good practice in drafting and editing of IEC standards. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available for those of you who want to listen to it again later on in the course of this week. And we hope to have enough time to present everything we want to talk about this afternoon, and have enough time to deal with questions and answers towards the end of the session if necessary. So without further ado, let's get started. Everyone has confirmed that they're able to see my screen and hear me. So that sounds like a good sign, and we'll be able to get on. So what are we going to have a look at today? So today we want to have a look at a few keys to success for the drafting of IEC publications. We want to have a look at some of the rules and sources of information, as well as a few essential notions linked to the drafting of standards. In addition to that, we will have a look at some of the workflows and communication which takes place between yourselves and the employees here at the IEC Central Office. And then we will reserve some time towards the end of the presentation for a brief presentation of the IEC template, as well as a demonstration, so that you can see how this works within your world. So let us get started. So first things first, a few keys to success. And I want to present these keys to success as at a fairly high level. They might seem extremely obvious, but it's always good to remind yourselves what you are doing and why you're doing it. So obviously, first things first, a successful IEC publication has to be technically correct. It's your job as technical experts, as experts within your particular field, to bring your expertise to the table and not only ensure that it's technically correct, but also that it represents a consensus of opinion at the time it was published. Standards also have to be written in a precise and simple style, for the simple reason that they have to be easy to understand, and that qualified people who have not participated in the drafting have to be able to understand it, and also to be able to translate it. The more simple and more precise the style of a document, the easier it is to understand, the easier it is to translate, not only into words, but also into actions. So one thing, and obviously at the end of the drafting exercise, users who use the standard have to be able to determine whether or not the product, process, or system that they are reading about conforms to the requirements of the standards. So they have to be able to test whether or not the standard conforms, the product, process, or system conforms to the standard. Next thing, with respect to the drafting exercise itself, there are a few key aspects to keep in the back of your mind, especially since there are many of you who work on the standards development process. First things first, you have to allow time for planning. There are many experts, many projects, and many schedules to manage within your world. A standard is typically developed over a 2 to 3 year period. But there are and that might seem like a long time, but if you consider the amount of people involved and the voting times, etc., you really have to allow time for planning. Another key aspect, from my perspective, from many different perspectives, is that you need one designated document manager for your document. We need to know who is in charge of the document and where the document is and what the reference version is. So one person needs to be in charge of the document or the subpart of the document, and we need to have one reference version. If we have many different parallel versions of a document floating around out there. By the time you get to the point where you'll need to merge them, you're going to have many problems. So knowing who's in charge of what and what the reference version is a key aspect. Linked to that, and this is also one of the core components of the standards development process, is that we need some kind of traceability and tracking of issues and their resolution. As we go through the standards development process, decisions are made, issues are raised, and we not only need to know when they were raised, who they were raised by, and how they were resolved, because in the course of a long standards development process, you might not remember what happened 2 years ago, what happened 3 years ago. So we need some kind of traceability and tracking of the major issues which concern your document. And this is all linked at the end of the day to communication. So communication is key throughout the standards development process, not only to reach consensus amongst yourselves, but also in terms of efficiency. You need to be able to provide the next person in line with all of the necessary information, be it background to decisions, particularities in the text, IT issues, etc., so that the next person in line can do their job properly without searching too much for answers wherever they may be. So, next, let's have a look at some of the rules and sources of information for your work. So the primary source of rules and information concerning ISO and IEC documents is the ISO IEC Directives Part 2. This provides a common framework for all ISO and IEC documents. Gives us common methodologies within the whole of the standards world. As an extension of that, we have a section on the IEC website called Drafting of IEC Publications. This provides explanations concerning some of the rules which exist. It gives recommendations for the drafting layout and graphics and figures. It provides user guides for the IEC standard template, and it provides tips and explanations on the use of Microsoft Word. So this is a very important part of the IEC website, and it's also important to note that it is a living part of the website. So if you see things which are missing within this part of the website that you'd like to see up there, please feel free to contact me, and we can always consider integrating new material and or adapting existing material as you see fit. So let's take a few steps back and ask ourselves, why do we need drafting rules within our world? After all, the key component of IEC standards is their technical content. But if we think about the fact that IEC publishes 600 documents a year and maintains a catalog of over 7,000 publications, that ISO regional bodies, national bodies also publish and maintain thousands of standards too. And that all of these international standards, whether it's in the IEC world, the ISO world, the regional world, the national world, etc., are all highly interdependent, and that we have tens of thousands of experts participating in standardizations worldwide, we realize what the value of common rules are. And they exist to ensure a certain amount of efficiency. With common work methods for experts, this means that they can focus on the technical content. It also helps in terms of ease of use, common understanding for all standards users. It allows for interoperability. Standards can work together because they are written according to the same rules, following the same structures and the same methods. And likewise, clarity and understanding. With a common language and common conventions, all standards are read using the same framework. And lastly, and this is also important in the international world, common rules allow for easier translatability. When you have common language common language and conventions, as well as structural conventions. This makes the standards easier to translate. And this certainly contributes immensely to the use of standards throughout the world. One last source of information which can be of use to you is the editing helpline. So each of the technical committees that works with the IEC has a designated has a designated editor here at the IEC. And the editor and all of the team who works with the editor will ensure that your document is edited thoroughly at the later stages of its development from the CDV stage onwards. But if you have any questions before starting a document, or whilst developing a document, or whilst planning a series, please feel free to contact your editor. We'll be happy to help, or you can contact myself or Sarah, and we're very happy to walk you through whatever it is you might need for the writing of standards. So how do you find the name of your editor? So if you go onto the TC dashboard, and here we have TC4. I saw that Mr. Arsenault is participating in the seminar today. Welcome to him. He'll be able to see that the editor is marked in the central office contacts under the offices tab. We also have a more generic helpline where if you're not sure who you should be contacting, we have generic addresses, editing@iec.ch, figures@iec.ch, and layout@iec.ch. So we're here to help at any point in the process, and we're very happy to do so. So let me just check if we have any questions. No, we don't, so I'll continue. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them in through the chat mechanism, and we will try to deal with them towards the end of the presentation. So let us continue onwards. Let's have a look at some of the essential notions, some of the cornerstone notions concerning standards, how they are written and how they are structured. So first things first, ISO IEC Directives Part 2 dictate a common structure for all IEC standards. So with a common structure, which consists of forward, introduction, scope, etc., the user can open any structure, any standard, and find the same structure. Makes it easier to read, and because each of these elements within the structure has a specific role, it makes it easier to interpret. I'd invite you to go in and have a look at ISO IEC Directives Part 2 in order to read a little bit more about the major structural elements of a standard. It'll give you some of the rationale that exists behind these elements and the rules which exist concerning each of these. So one of the first things you're going to have to do when you start writing a standard is to just write its title and scope. And this might seem trivial because it's not necessarily part of the hard and fast technical content, but it is very important because the title and the scope provide a concise description and delimitation of the subject matter. If we look at titles, we have to ask ourselves, when I write a title, is the title that I've written too wide-ranging, or conversely, does it unintentionally limit the scope of the document? Let's have a look at an example, which is a real-world example. So we have a title here, which is Grindability with Diamond Pellets, Test Method and Classification. What's wrong with that title? If you look at it and you think about it, we've written a standard about grindability with diamond pellets. Well, what are we grinding? Are we grinding, I don't know, are we grinding windows? Are we grinding doors? Are we grinding the floor? We don't know what we're grinding with a title like this. So we have to bring in a little bit more detail. So as this was corrected, and again, this is a real world example, raw optical glass, grindability with diamond pellets, test method and classification. We now know what we are grinding with our diamond pellets. So that hopefully is of use to the user. One other aspect linked to title, which is important, is that the title needs to proceed from the general to the particular. If we take the example of the raw optical glass and we switch the elements around, that could unintentionally limit the scope of the document, or even just make the title incomprehensible in a certain sense. So we need to proceed from general to the particular when we write our titles. So moving onwards with titles, one other aspect we should consider is that when a document belongs to a series, all of the elements in the series require a common title. So here is another real-world example where we have two documents which belong to the 60947 series. They have here a common title for the series, which is low voltage switchgear and control gear. And then after the part element, you give more details as to what the title, as to what that particular document contains. Now moving on to the scope. The scope is essentially an extension of the title. It provides details to the additional details with respect to the title. A title which is 3 paragraphs long is not going to be okay in any publishing medium. So the title has to be succinct, and the scope provides additional details. The scope can also include exclusions. So if you say this document applies to this aspect, it applies to that aspect, but it does not apply to this context, you've provided an exclusion, and it helps to delimit the scope any further. The scope is not a discursive part of the text, so it is not there to provide background information, nor to deal with the subject matter of other documents. So if you need to provide context on the subject matter of your document, why the document was written, in what context it was written, and what other documents it relates to, those details could go into the introduction. And very often they're very useful for people, but the scope is not the right is not the right place to include these details. You need a clear separation between the introduction and the scope. The next cornerstone principle when it comes to standardization is conventions for the expression of provisions. So language in any culture is subject to varying interpretations, and this is why we need specific conventions within standards which might not correspond to natural language, but which clearly delimit the function of every single provision which exists within a standard. So we have 4 main conventions which you should know about, and they're the following. So first of all, the word shall is used to express a requirement. If we take the example here, connectors shall conform to the electrical characteristics specified by IEC 60603. This is a requirement because there is the word shall in it. Next one is should, which is used to express a recommendation. Wiring of these connectors should take into account the wire and cable diameter of the cables defined in 61156. Next, we have may, which is used to express a permission. 60512 may be used as an alternative to 60512-27 for connecting hardware that has previously qualified for IEC 60603-7. So we are giving the user permission to use an alternative or to do something. Last convention is that can is used to express a possibility. So it's either a causal possibility, a possibility which is linked to a law of nature, etc. So the example that I've pulled out of one of the IEC standards is the following. Use of this connector in corrosive atmospheric conditions can lead to failure of the locking mechanism. So we're expressing the possibility, a law of nature, a causality. Fine. So these are the main conventions for the expression of provisions. And I do realize that they don't necessarily correspond to natural language, but they are there to make standards more precise. The objective is that any standard user should know exactly what are the requirements, what are the recommendations, and what are the permissions within a standard, and to not let natural language cause any confusion. The next cornerstone principle within standards, which you should be aware of, is that of normative references. So normative references are included in clause 2 of standards. And this clause contains a list of the publications which are cited normatively in the text. If we take two examples, first example, which is the one we saw before, where connectors shall conform to electrical characteristics specified by IEC 60603-7-1. This, because there is the word shall, the user is required to go and read what happens in 60603-7-1. Therefore, this is normative and it's listed in the normative references clause. Second example, which is the one we again saw before, wiring of these connectors should take into account the wiring cable diameter of the cables defined in 61156. Well, you'll remember that should is a recommendation, but not necessarily a requirement. Because it's only a recommendation, this is informative, and you should list this in the bibliography. So the normative references clause is important for readers of standards because there, in a glance, they can know which standards they are required to have in order to be able to apply the current standard that they're reading. One extra element linked to normative references is that references shall be dated if a specific element of the reference publication is cited. If you are citing a specific clause, a specific subclause, figure, table, annex, etc., you should date that. The reason being that if we are to look at this example that I have here up on the screen about the dimensions, which shall be according to table B1 of IEC 60793-2, is that if we were to take an earlier or later edition of 60793-2-50, table B1 might be different, might not exist, or might have different content. So if we are being very precise about the kind of references that we are talking about, we need them to be dated. So this element is dated in the text and in the normative references. On the other hand, if you're making very general reference to a standard, as is the case in this particular sentence, the test methods of IEC 6130-2-2 shall be used, there's no need to date that because it's considered that the latest edition, whatever it is, can apply. One last thing linked to normative references, please only cite published and publicly available documents. Don't cite drafts, don't cite private communications, don't cite things which are not available under either free or fair and non-discriminatory conditions. So it's fine if things are behind a paywall as long as it's not discriminatory conditions. Right. With that, I will continue. Another key element to standards is that of terminology. While common languages and terms are one of the keys to our system within the IEC, when you are writing a standard, it's good if you go to check in electropedia.org, which is the International Electrotechnical Vocabulary, to check whether or not appropriate terminology exists. And it's better to use this terminology than to try and invent your own terminology so that we can avoid unnecessary multiplication of terminological variants. So consistency of use of terminology inside a document is key. Consistency of use of terminology across a series, across a TC is also key, in my opinion. And ideally, if we use the same terminology throughout the IEC, that would be perfect. We know that the world is more complicated than that, but try and be as consistent as possible in the use of your terminology within your document. And you can go and see further details on how to write terminology within the ISO IEC directives, part 2. As an extension to terminology, the notion of graphical symbols is also an important one within not only the IEC, but also the ISO's world. So there are various graphical symbol databases which contain internationally standardized symbols. For example, 60617, which are graphical symbols for use in diagrams, IEC 60417 and ISO 7000, which are graphical symbols for use on equipment. Using standardized symbols is very important, and if you do not have an appropriately standardized system available within these databases, please do contact the TCs involved, and they have special processes in place in order to create appropriate symbols very quickly. Fine. Moving on to legal issues. So patents. So any potential patent declarations which concern your document should be submitted to the IEC as early as possible. We can't be held responsible for identifying any or all such patent rights, and we maintain a database of patents relevant to our standards at patents.iec.ch. If there are any patents which do concern your particular document, the details have to be included in the introduction of the publication. As an extension to that, copyright. This is a very obvious one, but we do regularly have issues with it. Please don't reproduce material from an exterior source without the permission of a relevant copyright holder. No copying and pasting of diagrams, no copying and pasting of chunks of text, please. If you receive permission to copy or reproduce certain material within the standard, please forward it to the technical officer here at the IEC, who will be able to record that here internally. And if you receive permission to reproduce material from an exterior source, please specify the source listed in the bibliography and insert a footnote which says that it has been reproduced with the permission of the author. Fine, so we've covered a few cornerstone issues concerning standardization, and they're dealt with in a lot more detail within the ISO IEC Directives Part 2 and on the drafting of IEC publications part of the website. But before I hand over to Sarah, I would like to just briefly have a look at workflows and communication with the IEC editing team at the various stages of the document's development. So before the CDV stage, documents are not edited by the IEC editorial team. We don't see the documents at all. They are provided to us and we circulate them as necessary, but we don't see them. But if you have any need for help on our part, we can easily provide practical advice. Don't hesitate to contact us, even at the earliest stages of a document's development. The earlier we deal with issues, the easier it is. So just a few reminders. Sarah will be talking to you about the IEC standard template later on. Please use that or IEV ... for Electropedia documents in order to structure your text. And another thing, if you're working on the maintenance of a previously published document, please use Microsoft Word, the MS Word publication file of the previous edition as your starting point. If you don't know where to find this, we can easily provide it. So at the CDV stage, what happens? So when you submit a draft CDV to us, it is then submitted to all of our national committees for potential translation or preparation of the vote. So they have 6 weeks to translate the document or to prepare it for their national vote. The document is edited during the voting period, which starts after the translation and which will last 12 weeks. So we work on the document whilst the CDV is being voted on. And what we will be doing in that particular period is that we will be formatting the document, and we will be doing some editing of the document, and we'll be doing that editing in Microsoft Word Track Changes. And once a document has been submitted for the CDV vote, we ask that you stop your work on it. Take a well-deserved break. You hand over the CDV to us, and the reference version is with us and in our hand. Please don't start work on parallel versions, because as we all know, the moment you have to start merging parallel versions, you run into problems. The reference version is here at the IEC. Once we've finished editing the document, it's sent to the secretary, who's thereafter responsible in forwarding it to the convener or project leader. So what do you have at the end of the CDV stage? At the end of the CDV vote, the TC secretary will receive an edited CDV version and the RVC document, the result of the vote, as well as all of the comments. First thing you should do is to go through our edited copy and one by one look at the comments and proposals that we have made, accept and reject them as you see fit, and just go through the file like that. Secondly, have a look at the National Committee comments, and any changes which result from the National Committee comments should be inserted at this stage. As a result, you have now a draft FDIS. So once you have submitted that draft FDIS to us, incoming drafts will go through an initial evaluation. We'll look at a certain amount of things before accepting it into our system. So we will have a look at a few basic things. Has the editor's work from the CDV stage been taken into account? If you just rejected everything without providing justification, we'll send it back to you for re-evaluation. Have the NC comments been taken into account? Are there any obvious major problems? Are there any missing texts? And are there any potentially challenging matters which are apparent, such as patent claims or copyright issues? If you have green lights everywhere, you'll be able to move on to the FDIS stage. So at the FDIS stage, contrary to the CDV, we will edit the document before it is circulated. The reason is that an FDIS is supposed to be the final draft and should resemble the final product as closely as possible. So we do the editing before it is circulated. We have a maximum of 12 weeks to do this, but in the majority of cases, it'll take us 6 weeks or less. Any questions which we have at this stage will be sent to the secretary, who's responsible for providing answers. And we expect answers within 10 working days so as not to delay the document any further. And after approval by the IEC technical officer, the document is circulated. Just a few words on communication during the editing stages. So any communication from the IEC will be sent to the TC secretary using the project's dashboard. So the secretary is our primary point of contact and is responsible for the formal submission of drafts to the IEC, for forwarding editing documents and any questions to the relevant convener or project leader, and making sure that appropriate answers are sent back. Just one last plea is that if conversations do start as a result of our questions, please avoid copying the editor in your internal email communications. Only send us answers once all issues have been resolved. Right, and with that, if we don't have any further questions or comments on the editorial aspects, I will hand over to Sarah to talk to you about the IEC template.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Sarah here, I'm the layout coordinator. And today I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the IEC template, including why we use it, first of all, some of the key functions of the IEC template, how to get started using it, so where to find it on our website, how to download it to your computer, and then where you can go for more information about using the template. We have some key resources on the website. We have lots of documentation that will give you much more in-depth, step-by-step guides for working with the template. So I'll point you to those afterwards. So first of all, why do we use the IEC template? There are three main reasons. So the IEC template is the basis for all of the IEC publications. So that includes the standards, technical reports, technical specifications, amendments. They're all based on one template. And it's mainly, the template itself is a package of styles that we've created in-house, and a few features, some buttons for automating complicated and repetitive tasks. So by using the styles, that allows us to do two things. That ensures that the IEC documents are visually consistent. They're instantly recognizable as IEC documents. The typefaces are always the same, margins, the way we use color, the way we create tables, that doesn't change from document to document. Also, by using the styles, what we're doing is we're ensuring that the content is structured in a way that's meaningful. And by this I mean by applying style to text, to chunks of text in your document, what we're also doing is telling Word that this piece of text has a certain identity or function and is meaningful within the document. So that goes back to what Alistair was saying about the common structure of the IEC documents. So by using the styles, for example, we're identifying elements such as the terms and definitions, the bibliography, clauses. So the styles have a very specific identity. You'll see when I open up the styles palette, it's a very comprehensive list of styles, and that's because they do more than control the visual properties of the text. They're also identifying elements of the document. And as I said before, to do with automation, we have a number of features in there such as inserting landscape pages, inserting terms and definitions that we've built and we've developed in order to make everybody's work easier. So what does the IEC template contain? So when you open up the template file, so the dot file, which I'll show you where to download from the website, you'll see that it's a Word template file that includes an outline of an IEC standard. I'll open this up in a minute. I'll go through this first, but it includes an introduction, headings, a table of contents, normative references. It has the base structure of an IEC template that you can use if you're creating a new standard from scratch. It also, as I said before, includes the styles. We try to avoid manual formatting where we can, so that would be highlighting text, clicking on bold, clicking on italic. We have specific styles for all of these, and that's why the list of styles is so long. By using the styles, we ensure repeatable results and, as I said before, assign that identity to elements of the text, which is really key in what we do here. The third thing is the template includes buttons which allow you to insert text and structural elements quickly and easily. So auto text such as the forward, standard texts which are associated with the normative references, for example, those will be quickly inserted when you have the template attached to your document. So I think it makes sense to open up the template and show you. Okay, so I've downloaded the IEC template here. So it's an IEC STD dot. I want to show you that when you double click on the template, this opens up a new Word document which is based on the template. If you were to right click on this and say open, this is opening up the template file itself, so the dot file. What we want is the document which is based on the template. You don't want to override the template file itself. So here, as I said before, is the standard structure, contents, introduction, forward, etc. And in these boxes are additional pieces of information, some tips and tricks, some references to the appropriate places in the IEC, ISO IEC directives. And if you are starting a brand new document, so you're not maintaining an existing standard, it's a good idea to go in here, use this as your starting point, replace text which is in red with your own text, use these as little guidelines, and then you can then delete them. This is a good place to get you up and running. So as I said, in addition to the structure and the little help boxes, the IEC template comes with this customized add-ins tab. So when you attach the template to your document, this tab will appear. And on here, on the top list, we have all these buttons. On the top level are buttons which allow you to quickly apply styles, some of the most commonly used styles in your document. So quickly and easily, you can select some text and quickly apply the style paragraph, in this case, heading 1, heading 2. On the second row, we have the automation features, such as the insert terminology field, which is very useful if you are inserting a number of terms and definitions into your document. So you can fill in the boxes with your example, if there's a note, if there's a source. Click on insert, and it's automatically entered into your document with the correct styles already applied. The next button along is the insert equation button. So this will open up math type. That one. If you need to insert a new annex, table or figure titles, numbered. If you need to insert a landscape page, this can be a little tricky if you're doing it manually, but this way it comes with the headings already. It inserts the section breaks where it's supposed to, and the headings, and it makes sure that the page numbers continue. And then also if you want to insert a table of contents, that's up here, adding or removing line numbers. So we've added all of these because these are really useful features that we tend to need to use a lot in creating our standards, and they're a little tricky to do manually. So this makes them easier. And the third line is auto text. So if you need to insert a forward for an international standard, one for a technical report, for a pass amendment, we have the normative reference text and the patent information. So you can just click and it will insert it directly into your document.
Okay, so thank you very much to Sarah. At this point, we've come to the end of what we wanted to present to you today. We realize these are the real basics of what you need to get started. There's a lot more, obviously, to all of this content. There's a lot more to be found concerning the drafting rules within standardization. In the world of standardization within the ISO IEC Directives Part 2 and on the drafting IEC Standards part of the website. There is also a lot more information on the template within the template documentation, which is very rich here at the IEC. So we do invite you to go and consult all of these things. We also encourage you to do a lot of learning by doing as you are writing your standards. So questions might come up as you are writing, as you are having to deal with a particular situation. And in those cases, we are there to help you. Do not hesitate to call us, to contact us if you have a question on a particular aspect of the drafting process. Now, I don't know if there are any questions which have been asked via the chat function, or if they are too complicated to deal with, we're using the chat function. We could also obviously reply to these questions later on by email or by telephone if you want to call us. We'll wait another minute or so to see if there are any questions which do appear. If there are none, we will assume that you have heard and seen what you have to see today, and I can certainly expect more follow-up questions as you digest this information, so we are available via email too. So in the absence of any questions which are appearing at this stage, I think we can perhaps bring this session to a close, and to thank all of you for your time and attention, and also for your valuable contribution towards the development of standards within the IEC. As I said, and I won't stop repeating this, we are here to help you guys. Don't hesitate to call us. No question is too small, no question is too big. We will do what we can to help you. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.